Welcome to the 5-Minute Warfare podcast from 5minutewarfare.com, where we dive into history's most pivotal battles and military strategies in around 5 minutes. Episode 6, The Crusades, Holy War in the Middle Ages. The Crusades were a series of religious and military campaigns that took place between the 11th and 13th centuries, initiated by European Christians with the goal of reclaiming Jerusalem and other holy sites from Muslim control. These wars, fought in the name of religion, have become emblematic of the medieval period, representing a complex mix of faith, politics, and violence. The Crusades had far-reaching consequences, shaping the relations between the Christian and Muslim worlds, as well as altering the social, economic, and political landscape of Europe and the Middle East. The origins of the Crusades lie in the shifting power dynamics of the medieval world. By the late 11th century, the Byzantine Empire, once the dominant Christian power in the East, was under pressure from the expanding Seljuk Turks, a Muslim dynasty that had seized large portions of Byzantine territory, including much of Anatolia. At the same time, Muslim forces had controlled Jerusalem, the city considered sacred by Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike, since the 7th century. The rise of the Seljuk Turks, however, restricted access to Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem, further heightening tensions between the Christian and Muslim worlds. In 1095, Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, desperate to reclaim lost territories, sent an appeal to Pope Urban II for military assistance. Urban saw an opportunity not only to help his fellow Christians in the East, but also to strengthen the papacy's influence and unite Christendom under a common cause. At the Council of Clermont in November 1095, Urban called on the nobility of Europe to take up arms in defense of Christianity and reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control. His passionate speech invoked the need to protect Christian pilgrims and framed the campaign as a holy war, offering those who fought spiritual rewards, including the remission of sins. The response to Urban's call was overwhelming. Thousands of knights, lords, and ordinary people took up the cross, sewing the symbol onto their garments as a sign of their commitment to the cause. The First Crusade, which began in 1096, was the most successful of the Crusades in terms of achieving its initial goal. Led by a mix of noblemen, including Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond of Toulouse, and Bohemond of Taranto, the Crusaders marched across Europe and into the Byzantine Empire, eventually reaching the Holy Land. After a brutal and bloody campaign, they captured Jerusalem in 1099, establishing several Crusader states in the region, including the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The capture of Jerusalem, however, did not mark the end of the conflict. The Crusader states were surrounded by Muslim territories, and their survival depended on continued military support from Europe. Over the next 2 centuries, several more crusades were launched in an effort to defend these territories and expand Christian control in the Holy Land. The most notable of these include the Second Crusade, 1147 to 1150, which ended in failure, and the Third Crusade, 1189 to 1192, which was launched in response to the recapture of Jerusalem by the Muslim leader Saladin in 1187. Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, emerged as one of the most prominent figures in the history of the Crusades. His recapture of Jerusalem was a major blow to Christian forces, but he gained a reputation for his chivalry and honor, even among his Christian enemies. The Third Crusade, led by some of the most famous monarchs of Europe, including Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, and Frederick I Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire, aimed to reclaim Jerusalem, but ultimately failed to do so. However, it did result in a treaty that allowed Christian pilgrims safe passage to the Holy Land. The Crusades were not solely confined to the Middle East. In the later stages of the movement, the idea of crusading expanded to include campaigns against other perceived enemies of the Christian faith. The Albigensian Crusade, for example, was launched in the early 13th century against a Christian sect known as the Cathars in southern France, deemed heretical by the Catholic Church. Meanwhile, the Northern Crusades sought to convert the pagan peoples of the Baltic region to Christianity. While the Crusades were framed as a religious mission, they were also deeply influenced by political and economic factors. For many European nobles, the Crusades offered an opportunity to gain land, wealth, and prestige. The kingdoms of Europe were often embroiled in internal conflicts, and the Crusades provided an outlet for the ambitions of younger sons who had little hope of inheriting land at home. Furthermore, the Italian city-states of Venice, Genoa, and Pisa profited greatly from the Crusades, as they provided ships and supplies for the expeditions, and their influence in the Mediterranean trade networks grew as a result. The Crusades also had profound consequences for relations between the Christian and Muslim worlds. While there were periods of mutual respect and even alliances, such as between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, the Crusades largely reinforced negative stereotypes and deepened hostilities. The violence and brutality inflicted on both sides, including the massacres of civilians, left a legacy of mistrust that persisted long after the wars ended. In Europe, the Crusades had lasting effects on the social and political order. The Catholic Church emerged with increased prestige and authority, having positioned itself as the leader of Christendom's military efforts. At the same time, the Crusades contributed to the centralization of power in the hands of monarchs, as many nobles either perished in battle or returned with diminished fortunes. The flow of wealth and goods from the East also introduced Europeans to new ideas, technologies, and cultural influences, helping to stimulate the intellectual and economic developments that would eventually lead to the Renaissance. By the late 13th century, the Crusader states in the Holy Land had fallen, and the era of the Crusades was drawing to a close. The last major stronghold, Acre, was captured by Muslim forces in 1291, effectively ending Christian rule in the region. Despite this, the legacy of the Crusades endured, shaping the religious, cultural, and political dynamics of both Europe and the Middle East for centuries. The Crusades, with their mix of religious fervor, political ambition, and violent conflict, remain one of the most complex and controversial episodes in history. They were wars fought in the name of faith, yet they were also driven by earthly desires for power and wealth. While the Crusades failed in their ultimate goal of securing permanent Christian control over the Holy Land, their impact on the medieval world was profound. They left a deep and lasting imprint on the societies they touched, and their legacy continues to resonate in the modern world. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the 5-Minute Warfare podcast from 5minutewarfare.com. If you get a chance, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, as it will help us to grow. Also, why not check out our other 5-minute podcasts, 5-minute biographies, 5-minute history, 5-minute murder, and 5-minute mysteries. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.